Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Reception by Kenzie Jennings. This is from Death's Head Press. It's a little blurry, it looks like, but there you go. And this is the story of Ansley Boone. She's gotten out of rehab for the weekend so that she can be a bridesmaid at her sister's wedding. And, after a bunch of family drama and, just the typical things that go on before a wedding, things get a little crazy. And right off the back of the book, Ansley and her sister must work together to fight for survival and escape the resort before the groom's cannibalistic family adds them to the post-wedding menu. They're at an isolated resort for the wedding. Anyway, that's the nutshell of the book, essentially. And, it's not really giving anything away. If you look there, you got some crazy-looking bloody guy. And if you look right there, there's a hand on a plate. So we know about the cannibals going in. So that's basically what we've got. Ansley's out of rehab for the weekend, and things are not good. Couple of things before I get into my thoughts on the book. I love this cover. It's made to look like a magazine cover. If you look up here, it says Volume 1, Issue 1, and then you've got like these little fake article teases. How to raise your B12 levels. Hint, the secret is red meat. And then top 3 places to go when you really need to escape. And 6 unique ways to prepare exotic meat. I just love that. And it's got a blurb from Jeff Strand, which is one of the reasons I've picked this up. So the other thing I wanted to mention before I get into talking about the story itself, I have had this book for some time. The reason I chose to read it now is that Kenzie Jennings has a splatter western coming out. Those of you who watch this channel, I've reviewed the first in Death's Head Press's splatter western series. If you watched my book haul video, you've seen the covers of the rest of them that I have, except for the newest one, because I made the video before I got that. And Kenzie Jennings just recently showed the cover painting for hers. Looks fantastic. I love all those covers. But because she's got that coming out, I figured it was the perfect time to read this before the splatter western hit the scene, as it were. And I got to tell you, I'm glad I read this. So right off the bat, you're getting the positive part of this review. So now let's get into the book itself. As I mentioned, you can see severed hand on a plate. Butchery looking guy. It says cannibalistic family right there on the back. And it actually starts with a little kind of preface. I don't think it actually says preface. No, it doesn't. But the very first thing we read after the foreword is a scene of Ansley and her sister in the middle of the chaos that's going on. And then we jump back to Ansley leaving rehab, being picked up by her mom. So, if we didn't have this cover image, and if we didn't have our little description on the back and this lovely picture, and if we didn't have that first little part, the preface that I'm calling it, without all of that, if you just picked this book up and started reading it from the first chapter, the first half of this book you'd think you were reading a family drama, the kind of story that is just about a woman that has gotten out of rehab for the weekend and is dealing with family issues and rehab issues. And this is not a bad thing at all. I'm just saying that's if you went in blind, this is what you would be dealing with for the first half of the book. But we do have that preface, and we do have this cover, and we do have the back cover blurb or description, whatever you want to call it. So we know going in that that something's coming, and knowing that, we can pick up on the little tiny things in this family drama that are cluing us in to what's going to happen. Since again, we already know what's coming. The characters don't, but so we can kind of see the things that they can't. Although Ansley does mention on occasion, "Oh, this seemed a little weird at the time. If I'd been paying attention," that kind of thing. And then about halfway through the book, after the wedding, once they get to the reception, that's when things go crazy, and it becomes a fight for survival for Ansley and her sister and other members of their family and the catering staff, and it gets wild. It is bloody and it is violent, and it is it's just insanity, and it's wonderful. So, as I mentioned, I already said, I really liked this book. I do like Kenzie Jennings' writing, her style. She really does build the characters and the relationships in that first half of the book. We get to know Ansley. We get to know why she was in rehab. It had to do with being prescribed something she shouldn't necessarily have been prescribed. And when she tried to stop cold turkey with these prescription drugs, there was an incident. And it was one of those go to jail or go to rehab kind of things. So she went to rehab, and she's trying to deal. Her counselor at rehab talked to her mom about how to help Ansley during this weekend that she's going to be away. They've got a pamphlet. She can text back and forth with her counselor. So she's trying to get through it. She wants to be there for her sister, for her family. And as I said, we're getting a lot of this character development. We get the relationship between Ansley and her sister, Ansley and her mom, and her dad. She doesn't have much of a relationship with the groom's family, but there's a little bit of that there, especially the groom's mother. And I really like how Kenzie Jennings builds these relationships and builds the character. I really like the relationship between Ansley and her sister. It's very, I think, realistic the way they act as siblings, because they have their inside jokes, but they also they know what buttons to push, and they'll fight, but then they'll laugh, and it's a very good relationship, well-written relationship. And even once the shit hits the fan, that relationship is still there. This book, structurally, I suppose, reminded me of From Dusk Till Dawn. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen that movie, but if you have, you know how the first half of the movie seems like a typical, say, Quentin Tarantino crime story with the Gecko brothers and the kidnapping and trying to get across the border, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if it's halfway through, I don't know exactly when it happens in the movie, but all of a sudden it's a killer vampire flick. And that's basically what you have here structurally. Again, you have the first half is sort of that family drama. I've been trying to think of a movie to compare it to, but family dramas aren't really my thing when it comes to movies. But you have that for the first half, and then you have the crazy cannibal second half. But it works. It's the first half isn't boring at all. It's well written. Again, characters are interesting. And then when we get to the carnage and mayhem, it is insane and so much fun. I'm always a little leery about using that word when talking about certain horror stories. But I find them fun to read and terrifying. You're rooting for Ansley and her sister and the people that aren't crazy cannibals. So yeah, it's really a great book. I'm so glad that I jumped in and read it. Like I said, I've had it for a long time, relatively speaking. It just came out in 2019. Don't remember when. And I picked it up because of the Jeff Strand blurb, mainly, and it sounded interesting. But, yeah, I mean, I was going to pick up the Splatter Western anyway from Kenzie Jennings, but at this point, I'll be definitely looking forward to anything she puts out if she keeps up this high quality. Now, here we go. We're going to do something a little different because I have to talk about some things that some might consider spoilery. So I considered making up some little signs, just writing on a piece of paper like my logo sign here. But I don't think I need that. So I'll give you I'll let you know when I'm just about to start talking about the spoilers. And then if you're not interested in hearing what I have to say that could spoil the book, just mute the video, and then I'll give you a thumbs up when I'm done talking about the spoilers, and you can turn the volume back on. I don't have the time or the inclination to figure out timestamps for this and say, just skip to this time, because that's not how we do things here at the Low Budget Review Show. So anyway, all right, now I'm going to start talking about spoilers. Mute your microphone mute your speakers right now. All right, here we go. First off, the ending of this book is, I think, going to be divisive. That's how I pronounce that word. I think some people might, just say, okay, it's a fine ending, but I think there's going to be people that hate it. I think there's going to be people that love it. I am one of the people that love it. It had me going back, leafing through the book to find certain things. I'm not going to be super spoilery here, but, some people consider when you say something about the end of a book, that some people think that's a spoiler. The fact that it's going to be a dividing ending. But yeah, I read that ending and I was like, oh, okay. I'm thinking now I'm going to go back and see and look at some stuff, and yeah, okay, I got it. I can see where things happened. And I loved it. I think it's fantastic. And there were some things in the book that suddenly made sense. There's something that I thought was a little repetitive. And again, this is the first thing I've read by Kenzie Jennings, so I wasn't familiar with her style, how she wrote, her storytelling style. And there was one thing in particular, that happens a few times, and I was like, she seems to be relying a little heavily on this, and now I know why, and it works perfectly. And then there was a point where I thought she had made a mistake, which happens, especially when you're editing your book, when you're going through and you're rewriting, and authors make changes, and sometimes they miss something. They decide, okay, this scene is going to work better in a different place, and so they move it, but then forget to maybe actually take it out of this place, or don't take the whole thing out. So there was something that I considered a mistake. I was like, oh man, this is, somebody missed something in the editing process. But then very quickly within the book itself, it's addressed. And I'm like, okay, so this is going to be explained. And then once you get to the end, you get your explanation for why it happened. And again, I loved it. So there's just these things, and I just felt that I should mention them. I wanted to talk about them without, getting specific. Obviously, I'm being vague. But again, these are things that some people might consider spoilers. Excuse me. Along the lines of, in no way related to, but along the lines of, if you told someone who was going to watch The Sixth Sense for the first time, if you told someone, watch for the color red. Every time, I think it's the color red, right? Every time the color red, pay attention every time the color red shows up. Or, pay attention to this, and, that'll tell you what's going to happen at the end. Some people think of that as spoilers. So here we go. Anyway, all right, that's enough of that. So I'm giving the thumbs up. There you go. Turn your speakers back on. All right, so that is it. I think I've covered everything. Loved the story. Loved the ending. Loved the characters, the style. Love the cover. This is a Lynn Hansen cover. She does a lot of great book covers and art and stuff. You should subscribe to her newsletter if you haven't already. Lynn Hansen. Good stuff. Death's Head Press. I'm becoming a big fan of theirs, what with the splatter westerns and all. But 5 out of 5 I gave this on Goodreads. Volume 1, Issue 1. Love it. I highly recommended. The Reception, Kenzie Jennings. Definitely looking forward to whatever she does next. Again, obviously the splatter western, that's my kind of thing. But whatever she moves on to past that, I'm looking forward to it. I really, really dug this. Pick it up, read it, love it, the way I do. So we can all share in the love. All right, so if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. But let's post a spoiler warning because we try to be nice here at the Low Budget Review Show. That reminds me, I have a question. Question of the week. I'll call it. This story is told in first person. Ansley is our narrator. So how do you feel about horror with first person narration? Generally, there are exceptions, but generally, if you're reading a horror story in first person, you know that the narrator is going to survive. I have read stories where it turns out the narrator's a ghost. But typically, I don't know. Like I said, you know the narrator survives. So does that, how do you feel about that? Do you prefer third-person narration in your horror? Does first-person narration bother you, or is it just another form of telling the story to you? Let's talk about that. First-person narrators in horror. All right. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I believe that's all I've got for you. So this has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith. And until next time, read more books.